AJ Delgado, she's back. She'll be joining us momentarily, but she's in Miami, right? See, we are in the Snowmageddon Ice Bowl of the country here in Washington, D.C., where the wind chill is -10. AJ's in Miami. We should just cancel her. It should be like nobody should be able to call us up when it's -10 from Miami sitting on a beach. It's just not right. But we have a big heart, so we're going to let her on anyway. Joining us now, AJ Delgado from Miami. AJ is currently one of the senior advisors of America First Policies. That is the numero uno PAC aligned with moving ahead the Trump agenda and Trumponomics, which we are in favor of. And also, she served on the Trump campaign in 2016. She took a sabbatical. She had a baby, and now she's back in action. And she's in Miami in the sun. AJ, why are you in sunny Miami and we're all up here freezing our butts?
Hey, John, it's great to be with you. It's actually about 45 degrees here, so I'm not on the beach, so you don't have to be that jealous. It's what we call down here blizzard weather. Everybody's walking around as if it's 10 degrees. It's really only 45. You would probably laugh at us if you saw us.
I know. There's just something wrong with that picture, right? Complaining because it's 45 degrees. It's so cold here. I was telling my audience earlier that in my studio in D.C., I mean, we got the heat cranked up. It doesn't matter. We just can't. So I've got the headphones serve as my ear muffs. So that's about the only thing warm is my ears. Everything else is pretty cold, but we got the hot coffee on and that. Hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. But, hey, AJ, it's good to have you back. Tell us about your baby and all that good stuff.
Great. Thank you for having me. You're actually the first show I'm doing since coming back, and I've listened to you before, so I thought it'd be a great way to come back in is to join you, John, and your audience. So I had as you know, or as I'm sure some of your audience may have read, I had a baby, so I took about a year off. His name's William, and he's now about to turn 6 months in a few days, and he's the love of my life and the apple of my eye. So it was wonderful to be able to take the time off. But as you can imagine, I was watching from the sidelines and eager to jump back into the fray and speak up for the Trump agenda. It's just doing so great. As you were mentioning in the intro, the markets are through the roof, these markets that the media assured us would crash if Donald Trump became president, and instead we're setting records, and unemployment is at 17-year lows. So it's great to be back because it's such good news that we get to share, and we're moving the needle. Mr. Trump is really moving the needle, even more than I expected we would see. So it's a great time to jump back in.
Well, look, it's good to have you back, and it's unbelievable. I was telling my audience when I got on at 6 today that I got to the studio at 4 a.m. We put CNN on, and I think out of the 2 hours we had them on, they spent 30 seconds talking about the stock market hitting 25,000, and they gave the jobs report. And the other 2 hours, 59 minutes and 30 seconds, other than their advertising, was basically Trump sucks. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And let's just go to this New York Times report. I want to start there because the Times has this bombshell, another leak in the White House West Wing. I don't really get these people. They're supposed to go there to serve the president. They go there to serve themselves very myopically, egomaniacs. So they leaked this out that the president went to Dan McGahn, his chief White House counsel, and said, look, I don't want Sessions to recuse himself. It's my attorney general. I don't think he has to. Everybody knew that. Trump has already said that. Can you find a way out of this? Right? And then the New York Times turns that into obstruction of justice. How the hell do you make that link?
Right. Isn't that just asking a legal question? I don't see how there's anything inappropriate in what's even implied there. And that's part of this entire Russia narrative that the media is falsely creating, is they present a headline, and this New York Times report this morning is a perfect example, in an ominous, oh my God, look what he's done tone. But your audience, you are smart enough to read and go, wait, I'm reading the facts in the article. What exactly is improper here? I'm not seeing what's illegal here. I'm not seeing what's improper here. But they present it in this, whoa, get a hold of this tone that for some out there who might not be so bright, including the media, would say, oh my gosh, yet another bombshell, where there isn't one. And this is what they do nearly every day. And that's why we still have this ridiculous Russia story continues. It's almost a monologue the media is having amongst itself. When there's absolutely nothing there, and it'll be egg on their face in a few months' time So it's really, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot the longer it keeps going. Whereas the American public, if you talk to people on the street, John, friends, family, everyday normal people, nobody's talking about this. Nobody's talking about what's going on with this false narrative or this New York Times report today. They're talking about the markets. They're talking about jobs. They're talking about immigration. And Mr. Trump keeps trying and is focused, and we're seeing the results, on those real issues, while the media, gee, I would love to live in a lofty ivory tower where I get to focus on these fancy tales rather than things like, hey, how am I going to pay my bills next month? Hey, how's the economy doing? Will I have a job next year? That's what the American public cares about. So God bless the New York Times that they live in a fantasy bubble where they get to worry about fantasies and fables that they come up with, like the Russia narrative, like this report today, whereas we're worried about the real issues, and as Mr. Trump is.
Well, it's a fable, but, you know, you just have to look at, AJ, some of the people in the White House. It's just maddening to me. I mean, you look at this book that came out today, the one that's written by Michael Wolff, by the way, who has a tabloid journalism, make news up, fantasy journalistic history. And that's fine. I mean, he can do whatever he wants. But you look at this thing and you say to yourself, how on earth, who made the decision to let this guy 6 months into this administration roam around the West Wing? First of all, who the hell had time to meet with this guy when you've got this massive agenda? You're supposed to be the disruptor of all time. You've got all these enemies. Who would have time to sit and talk to some author? That's number one. Number two, who gave him access? Now, the president said, look, I wouldn't meet with him, but somebody gave him access. The guy sat on the sofa, ran around on chairs, had coffee. They brought him bagels. In your wildest dreams, can you imagine being in a meeting and somebody says in April, you know what we're going to do? We're going to let in Michael Wolff, and he's going to come into the West Wing for about 4 months because we're going to let him write a book and talk about how great we are. I mean, who on earth in that meeting can say, hey, that's a great idea? I mean, what is going on?
Right. And it saddens me because Mr. Trump, one of his personal characteristics that everyone admits is true, even his critics, is he's a very loyal individual. And so to see people who have the privilege of working in the White House, it's an honor of a lifetime for anyone who's there, abuse that privilege, not only with leaks, but with things such as what you just said, allowing a reporter access, unfettered access, it seems, for months at a time in the White House. There's either some disloyalty or some folks in there that aren't thinking clearly, perhaps at best. But I think the vast majority of folks in the White House are clearly committed to Mr. Trump, to our agenda. And you might have a bad apple in there every now and then that makes a bad decision. As far as the book, it's noise. It's just noise. The excerpts I've read, I even tweeted about it yesterday, where there's an expert that says that Stephen Miller relied on talking points and isn't really a gifted individual. Absolutely not. My gosh, that man is a genius. I sat across from him multiple times when he was working on speeches, and I would just sit there going, wow, Steve knows what he's doing. He is just a gifted policy wonk. And so when you read excerpts that you know, based on your own experience, are incorrect, it makes me question the entire book. Such as Melania crying. Melania was not crying. I was there with them at Trump Tower on election night. She was so pleased and so happy with the results, as was the entire family. So it's noise. I think people might buy it because people love to read negative, juicy tales, right? And if it were anything positive, it wouldn't sell. So they might buy it, but really at the end of the day, we have to stay focused on the real issues because that's what the American public wants us to stay focused on. Enjoy your book for a few days. I'm sure this guy will make a lot of money off of it. I'm more interested in making sure real Americans are making a lot of money off of these stock market highs and this great unemployment record that we're seeing hit rock bottom. That's the real money and the real sales that I'm interested in. So, hey, good luck with your book, but we'll stay focused on the real issues Mr. Trump is and the White House is. The vast majority of people in the White House, that's what they're thinking about today and not this book. That I'm pretty confident of.
AJ, let's get to keeping the government open. January 19th, we're probably going to get another continuing resolution, CR. But the real fight is over DACA, Dreamers, the president getting rid of Obama's program, but that's going to expire in February. He's got to do something with it. The Democrats are saying, look, you're not going to get to 60 without a deal on DACA. We'll shut the government down. Nobody wants that to happen. Yet the president made promises over and over again during the campaign that he would not go forward with DACA amnesty. He's between a rock and a hard place. How do you see this playing out, A.J. Delgado?
Well, as a Hispanic, obviously this issue is very near and dear to my heart because I live in a community where I have friends who are undocumented. So it's an issue that I approach from one, not only of personal experience with those in my community, but with compassion, as does President Trump. That said, we also need to realize that the problem with DACA and what with President Obama did was, John, at what point does it end? Because every few years, are we going to have a DACA? Because every day there are kids who come in undocumented through no fault of their own whose parents bring them in. So in 5 years, are we going to have another one? In 10 years, will we have another one? At what point then are we just saying all children in perpetuity who come into this country brought in by their parents illegally will at some point get to stay? That's unsustainable, and it's unfair to the American public. It's unfair even to these individuals. So what Mr. Trump is doing, rightly so, is addressing the issue compassionately. He's saying we can have a one-time fix. It's true these minors came in through no fault of their own, but we need to do it in a way that addresses the problem so that it doesn't happen again. So how does his solution do so? Well, the wall will help stem the problem. Eliminating chain migration will help stem the problem, because if you're bringing in your children, but you know you can't use those children to then bring in the rest of the family, that might serve as an incentive not to. Eliminating the visa lottery would also just be a great added bonus that we could get from the Democrats for their insistence on DACA. So if we can get those concessions that Mr. Trump has laid out from the Democrats in exchange for a one-time fix, I would be okay with that. I'm not sure how you feel on DACA, and I'd love to hear your take, but I'm okay with, as much of a hardliner as I am on immigration, I do think we need to look at the issue compassionately and realistically, and there does need to be some sort of fix. You can't say, oh, well, these people who have been living here since they were 2, 3, 5 years old will now just have to go back or be deported. It's not realistic, and Mr. Trump, being somebody who comes to issues not only from a compassionate standpoint, but the standpoint of a businessman, of a realist, knows we do need to have a fix. But, hey, let's use that fix to get concessions that will stop the problem from continuing to arise as it always does.
We're with A.J. Delgado. She is a senior policy advisor for America First Policies, the #1 political action committee advancing the president's agenda. A.J., I'm a hardliner on this, as you know, but I'm in agreement with you for this much. I think that I would be willing to embrace a one-time deal with a path to citizenship for those that came here under the so-called DACA program or as dreamers, as long as we can get funding for the wall. And I don't care if it's a mile or a half a mile. If there's funding that says here is the mechanism to go forward and start this wall, then I think a lot of us would be amenable to a deal on DACA. But without the wall, I mean, for the Democrats to say we're going to tighten security, I've been hearing that, AJ, for 40 years. Okay, it's a lie.
Tell me about it. Gang of 8. I was up in arms about that. It was the same thing. Amnesty in exchange for some lukewarm, quote-unquote, border security.
It's baloney.
No thanks. That's why I thank God for Trump, who's saying, oh, no, specifics, not your nebulous, vague border security term. The wall, an end to chain migration, an end to the visa lottery program. He's demanding specifics. For once, we have somebody who's demanding specifics and not just the nebulous border security, and we'll give you your amnesty. It never works. That's why I think this is actually an opportunity for immigration hardliners to have a win here, because we would be doing the compassionate thing while at the same time getting some great concessions that no other president, no other Republican is willing to hold the line for us on other than President Trump being in that Oval Office. That's why this was such a critical win for those of us who believe in sensible immigration policy. Is a Marco Rubio presidency would not have done this. No other president of that candidacy, that primary field, would have done so. We're very grateful and very thankful that we have President Trump in office, who really is holding the line on what he promised us in the primaries, but doing so in a compassionate way. I also wouldn't want a president who is so unrealistic to say, no, we can't do anything about DACA. The truth is the American public really does support doing something about those children, many of whom are still quite young. So I think it's the right approach to do so, but to do so in a way that addresses the problems that doesn't continue to come up.
Well, the president does the art of the deal, and this deal, I think, again, I'm going to go back to it, it's got to include funding for starting a wall, because that is a very important aspect of this, and that's the one thing we know the Democrats absolutely don't want. And my question is always, okay, so what are you afraid of? I mean, the wall doesn't work. It doesn't work. Well, it worked in Israel. Well, that's different. It doesn't work. Okay, so it doesn't work. So Solyndra didn't work either. Is anybody dead? No. It's just wasted money, right? We went with you on that. We went with you on all the billions for shovel ready and Obama's work program. That didn't work. Okay, so what didn't work? So you spend money, it didn't work. What's the downside? The upside is it does work, but what's the downside? Here's the reason, AJ, the Democrats go crazy over the wall. They know it's going to work. And the problem is they know it's going to work. That's why they don't want it. Now, they say it isn't, but they know it is, because if that goes up and the flow of illegals stops coming over the southern border of the United States, their money dries up. Why does it dry up? Because all these people and the open border Republicans are funded by the slave labor, cheap labor network, which is dependent on open borders and a free flow of cheap labor coming into the United States. So their money dries up. That's number one. The second thing that happens, well, they can't get cheap votes either, because they take those people, they put them on welfare or some food stamps, and then they become Democrats, and they end up not checking the box on the form to register. And if they ever do become citizens, they vote D down the line. So this is the unholy alliance that goes on. But my thing is, if you're afraid the wall's not going to work, then you don't have anything to lose. But
what's the downside?
There's no downside.
And it's even unrelated to immigration. I had proposed this to a liberal friend I was having this discussion with. I said, okay, if you think it's silly and you mock us, our idea of the wall, how about the wall stemming the flow of drugs that come in trucks by the truckload into this country that are killing not only our youth, our entire populace across ages, across demographics? Are you going to tell me that a physical barrier won't make it harder for those smugglers to come in? Silence.
Yeah, because you know what?
Oh, so it would work. At least from the drugs angle, tell me you support it. Right. Maybe you don't care about immigration. Maybe you live in Maine and you don't really care about the immigration on the southern border. You think, wrongly so, that it doesn't affect you. It does, but you think it doesn't. Well, think about the drugs that come in and think about the kids who fall prey to those drugs. Are you going to tell me that President Trump is wrong when he stresses the need for the wall, not just for immigration, sensible immigration policy, but to help keep our children, and many, as I said, across ages and demographics, off of this poison?
AJ, you're right. We're out of time. You got a fan here, got a text from Andre in Richmond, says, please tell AJ we're glad she's back. We love her. Good points on DACA.
Thank you, Andre.
There you go. You're back.
That made my day. Thank you.
You got your fan club going. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Stay with us. I'll be right back. Keep it right here.